My aha moment came when I started rereading Max Weber, something I hadn't done in a long time. And I don't know what drew me to Max Weber, to be honest. Maybe some memory in my head about what I had read in sociology classes a long time ago. But I was drawn there. And it also struck me as I was reading Weber that Weber was writing at the same time as the Filipinos were fighting. Virtually the same time period, 1890s. That's when Weber was formulating his ideas. It was kind of eerie. I characterize my interpretive stance in the essay as Weberian. In my view, the writings of the great sociologist Max Weber can help us understand the puzzling events of 96, 97. My basic argument is this. The conflict between Bonifacio and Aguinaldo issued from different approaches to warfare and leadership. Bonifacio adopted a consultative approach to war making, derived from a pre-conquest leadership style. Some things we know about early contact Philippines with Spain was that they had developed this style. It's sometimes characterized by Oliver Walters as mandalas. And one finds this in other Southeast Asian places. So Bonifacio had, if you like, an older style, hence the reliance on the pulong. The meeting which offered participants an opportunity to consult. It's important to note that in pre-conquest times, leaders, in effect, had to earn their spurs. They had to exhibit prowess, but they also had to consult and lead a group. Bonifacio's approach was that approach. Aguinaldo, on the other hand, favored a centralized, hierarchical military approach, top-down, relying on bureaucratic arrangements similar to those in the Spanish army. My essay traces the course of the conflict between the two Filipino leaders, culminating in the arrest, trial, and death of Bonifacio. So this is the complexity. So I try to work it out. I think I succeed. I'll just quote to you from the conclusion. I do so because it emphasizes the thesis rather than the complicated narrative. Well, let me just look at my watch. Shouldn't. Okay, how are we doing time-wise? Fine. Okay, good. Oh, I like interruptions. A Weberian tale. Some of Max Weber's most influential writings relate to the role of charismatic leadership in human history. Weber was into charisma. As Weber tells us, charismatic leaders often pose challenges to and sometimes overthrow existing regimes. Weber tells us, too, that these leaders, however energetic and creative, are invariably more successful in destroying old structures than in establishing new ones. Charismatic leaders challenge, disrupt, destroy, and then, one way or another, pass from the scene, leaving to others, bureaucratic elites, to rebuild. The typically insuperable challenge to charismatic authority is what Weber calls the routinization of charisma, to, in effect, integrate the charismatic leader in the leadership. Now, the story I've told in this essay is, in a certain sense, a Weberian tale. It doesn't follow the Weberian scheme exactly, but it comes pretty darn close. And what do we see? We see a man, Andres Bonifacio, who led a secret society, the Katipunan, which posed a serious challenge to Spanish colonial state. Something of a firebrand, Bonifacio pushed the society doggedly in the direction of rebellion, but was initially unsuccessful, in part because his powers were circumscribed. He was premier among almost equals. The Katipunan operated along decidedly consultative lines, placing ultimate decision-making in the Pulong, which included representatives of the constituent units of the larger secret society. The Katipunan's organizational structure was modeled to some degree on, I said, the mandalas of pre-conquest Southeast Asia. which were led by people of prowess who sought to achieve their ends through consultation rather than compulsion. That's how it worked through talking. And the pulang was the major institution. In effect, Bonifacio's authority rested on pre-conquest foundations. He was a charismatic leader who relied on a traditional organizational model, which he was wedded to, so wedded to that ultimately he paid the price. We see then a revolution break out which presented Bonifacio with new circumstances and a new set of challenges, essentially bureaucratic in nature. Bonifacio struggled with those challenges. He fought the war in pretty much the same way he had run the secret society. That is, through pulang. And the results were disappointing. In time, some of his fellow revolutionaries operating in a different area, Cavite, came up with a different approach, independently, calling for the adoption of a new organization, new procedures, new leaders. And the end of charismatic authority came at a pulang. That the meeting at Tejeros was the pulang sa Tejero. It was not the Tejeros assembly. That sounds like something out of British history. It was a pulang. It's just a damn pulang, for God's sake. Came at a pulang in Tejero, at a point in the revolution when it was obvious to any Filipino that the Katipunan's one-time man of prowess did not demonstrate prowess in the battlefield. He lost battle after battle. At Tejeros, the former rivals, Magdiwang and Magdalo, came together to vote against Bonifacio. He had lost the audience, as I probably will if I keep on too long, and in favor of centralization. Bonifacio, the charismatic leader, had succeeded in raising the flag of rebellion, but it was left to a new bureaucratic authority, exemplified by Aguinaldo, to finish the job. In short, and here's the point, here's the aha for me, because I always thought of the Philippines as so different from the rest of the world in this regard, killing its own hero. In short, we see a revolution and a set of historical circumstances that do not seem all that different from those found in other places. After all, this was a type. This is a Weberian type he was describing. Charismatic leaders, this is what happens. That's what happened to Bonifacio. He was a Weberian type. The details are unique, but the process is familiar. At bottom, the conflict between Bonifacio and Aguinaldo was one brief skirmish in the perennial struggle between the charismatic and the bureaucratic. And for me, this was a great aha moment. I didn't have to apologize for the actions that occurred in the revolution. Okay, third essay. Well, I'll try to be brief. It's something completely different. It's like Monty Python, right? Now something totally different, right? I wear a dress. Okay, that's not going to happen. Third essay, Chapter 7, deals with the outside impact of an American-born Jesuit academic named Frank Lynch. Before I go forward, does anybody here worked for Frank Lynch?
No, but I knew him.
You knew him?
Yeah.
You
I
have?
actually did research for IPC.
You did research for IPC?
Right now.
You are. You don't want to listen to the rest of what I have to say. You really don't. But anyhow, I have June Aguilar, who's a good friend, of course. My God, Mary Rosales. There are some wonderful people who are there, and I actually relied on them in doing this piece. And I regret some of the things I'm about to say. Okay. Frank Lynch. In the period 1960 to 1975, no social scientist in the Philippines was better known or more influential than Frank Lynch. Trained.
I doubt it, but go ahead.
What did you say? I missed that one, Frankie.
Yeah.
No, did you say that?
Look, I was editing a journal called Solidarity, so I was in touch with all the scholars, not only here, but, all over South. I don't think he had that kind of influence that you mentioned.
Really?
Yeah. Well, but go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, who am I to argue with a Ramon Magsaysay Award winner?
Come on.
Yeah, that's right,
I
I remember
say about Aguinaldo too, and And because I interviewed him in the 50s.
I have to defer to Frankie. I'm obviously all wrong on this one.
No.
I am completely wrong on this one. He's not even giving me a chance to get started. But you know what, though? I can understand your point. And by the way, did you find that people were devoted to Lynch?
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
They
were very devoted.
Yeah.
But influence, it's only within the Ateneo that Catholic,
Yeah.
England. He had absolutely very little influence in the other universities in UP. As a matter of fact, he was regarded as an ogre by these radicals in the UP. But go ahead.
Who wants to? Shall we participate in a dialogue at this point? Actually, I think you sometimes have to go with the moment. And okay, Frankie, I'll present a few of my points,
Yeah, go
and
ahead.
you present some of your points. Okay, SIR. The core smooth interpersonal relations.
Yes.
Right. Okay. That's one of the concepts that.
He misunderstood it. It's all about you go about it, and it's all power relationship.
Well, we're in agreement here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we're probably on the same on the same page. You're just discounting the fact that I'm saying that he was influential because other people must have seen through him. But the downside to Lynch was in some ways also the upside. He was in a position at IPC to generate research.
Oh, yes.
And he drew up, by my count, more than 50 research proposals, which had as their core element a testing of SIR and Paki Sama and all of those concepts that he and Mary Holsteiner / Rosales were working on. So in study after study after study was looking into whether or not that was so or not, and not looking at anything else. And what was particularly, I think, troubling was that there were increasingly scholars outside the Philippines who thought that the type of work that Lynch was doing was stupid, profoundly stupid. For one, lots of resources are trying to test this thing, which the reality was there were people outside the Philippines didn't think it was true at all. There was a fellow named Lee Seacrest who did some studies on violence in the comparative violence in the Philippines and the U.S. and determined that in fact the Philippines had much more killing per capita than the U.S. How could there be this pakiki sama stuff? So, I think the downside to Lynch was that he was in this powerful position, and that study after study was undertaken to test something or other, which was really quite problematic. What do you have to say to that? You're in agreement? You're in agreement.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, you're denying that he was that influential.
No. His influence, I said, is overrated.
Mm-hmm. Well, from my point of view, if that's so, and I don't know, it's not so. I think that's a good thing. Anybody else here? Anybody? Oh, how about my IPC person? How is Lynch held on the part of IPC nowadays?
Well, I mean, I've only been there for 6 months.
And you want to keep your job too.
Yes. And I love IPC and I love Twitter and everything. But at the same time, his name is on mention. It's honored in terms of
Mm-hmm.
the picture and the scene of the name and everything. But basically, it's the organization more belongs to Mary Rosales in terms of
Yes, right.
her legacy onward, but not focusing in on the French
Mm-hmm.
at all.
But wasn't she doing the same sort of thing? I don't know if you're familiar with Mary Rosales. Wonderful person. I agree with all that. Anybody else, by the way, want to chime in here? We've gotten through that part pretty quickly. I think Frankie and I seem to be in agreement that Frank Lynch was not worth worrying about too much. Let me talk about, just briefly, about what I'm doing now. Okay, so some of this is old news and some of this is new news. And this is really new news. A study of Calamba. Early stages of research. Rose Mendoza over there, who spends more time in the archives than any person I know. Okay. Lots of research that could be done on the town of Calamba. I'll start with a confession. Early in my academic career, I became fascinated with the Annales School. The Annales School of French historians. They published a journal, Annales, Économie, and other things. So these were the historians, mostly French, who explored the daily lives of ordinary people in the past, mostly in France. So I was treated to some of the studies as a young person. I was heavily influenced by them, and from time to time I gave serious consideration to writing a book about Philippine history in the Annales style, studying everyday life, mining the same types of sources used by the Annales, sources which exist in the Philippines, albeit not in as much abundance as they do in France. And I also wanted to apply some of the same type of analytical techniques. One was something called family reconstitution. I thought about it, I never did it. Until now. My new book in the making, which I call Calamba in the Time of Rizal, is a study of everyday life in a single Philippine municipality in the second half of the 19th century. Calamba is best known as, being the birthplace and childhood residence of the most famous Filipino in history, Jose Rizal, author of the Noli. Every Filipino has heard of the place, I hope. They learned about it in Rizal's early life in Calamba, in writings, both about and by Rizal, that are required reading in school classes. Now, in my book on Calamba, though I want to focus not on Rizal. It's almost perverse, isn't it? So I'm doing this book on late 19th century Calamba, and I'm trying not to write about Rizal. Obviously, I can't. I can't pull that off. But Rizal certainly is not going to be the focal point. He stood out. Calamba was, in some ways, an out-of-the-way place at the time. It didn't have even in Laguna, it didn't have the depth of Piñan and San Pablo. But I'm going to focus on the rest of the people in Calamba, on their work and on their social relationships, on their concerns, on their health, on their ill health, studying all the sorts of things that analysts will study about the communities that they study. I've done some work on them before I came here. For about 3 months or so, I've been working in Philippine parish records. They're easily available nowadays. If you have a LDS church, a Latter-day Saints church, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. If you're a Mormon, you spend a good deal of your time tracing your ancestors and extracting, as they call it. But for the rest of us, it means that whatever community we're in, we can get Salt Lake City to send us copies of the parish registers of any place. I picked Calamba, I picked other places in the past, and they come. Nacimientos, defunciones, matrimonios. Okay, so birth, death, and marriage. And although they're somewhat resistant, they start telling stories. of all sorts, about length of life of people, of how many children women had, all the sort of stuff that we don't read much about in Philippine history. Here's another confession. I, like lots of men, seem to be more interested in male activity than female activity. And I must say I'm horrified now, looking back on the writings I've done in the past. And other people think I might be horrified about other things entirely. What horrifies me most is how little I've written about women. And really, and it's as if I didn't have a clue, you know? But warfare, I write about warfare, it's too much of male activity. Women do more of the dying, you know? Yeah? You think I'm wrong about that? They're not in uniform. But you look at Calamba in the Revolution, or any place in the Philippines in the Revolution or Philippine-American War. Trust me. And there's an article in this book, by the way, that deals with migration. What happens when the alien army enters the town? The women, the children, the old people go to the highland communities where they get malaria, among other things. So, yeah, I'm in a self-loathing period of late, and so this is my penance: to spend my time in the National Archives fighting with the management, so they'll open up some of the records that they've been closing for no good reason at all. Is there anyone from the press here? I am willing to elaborate on this one. I'll take the hit from my fellow scholars. If I don't get this book done, it doesn't matter. You know, more people will like me if I don't do the book, I think, than any of that. Philippine National Archives has a good deal of stuff. USD has lots of it. There really is a tremendous amount of stuff available. I think it is possible to do this sort of history, which, you know, it's not about great leaders, that's Rizal, or physical activities by males on battlefields, or the inner workings of politics, but Lord knows. I think we as a group, historians at least, can do a better job of dealing with half the population and writing about their histories as well. Oh, by the way, history as a professional, you wouldn't guess this from what you see in the Philippines. It's principally a male activity. Most of the students are males. And I think there's a reason for that it does not speak to them, that is to the female. It does not. In my university, we have 30% of our history majors are female. It's under 1 in 3. Why is that? It's because of professors like me who obviously don't know how to write the book. So this is my penance. If I survive, that I will hope to write that book. Stay tuned.